Hi, hiya, Tiwafola. Hello, Boxy Abe. Hi, Caroline Onosian. Hello, Sherifat. Hi. So Tunde will join us soon. Um, Hi, Ifi Iro. Thank you for joining. Hello, Onye. Hi, I am Bimbo. Hello, Double Dahila 8. Hi. Hello, Victoria. Hi. Okay, so Tunde is here. Um, Hi, Tunde. Um, so Tunde, can you request, or do you want me to add you? Hi, Zizi. Hi, Bibibi. Tunde, can you request to join? Okay, so I've added Tunde and he's joining now. Yay! What?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hello. Good afternoon. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Okay, so everyone, this is Tunde Leye. He's our
Yes,
author
this
in
is me.
focus today. So I'm going to introduce Tunde, and then we can go on. So Tunde is the author of 3 novels. Tunde wrote Afonja, The Rise, Guardians of the Seal, and Golden Sands. And he also wrote an illustrated children's book. I read that book like over a year ago, The Rat's Race, and I really liked it. And Tunde has a new book coming out now, Aganju, for children, and that's what we're going to be discussing here today. So Tunde blogged at TLS Space, place.wordpress.com, and he had a really popular series like 3 years ago, Finding Hobby. Lots of people know that series. In fact, when I shared
8
the
years ago,
information
actually.
about, sorry,
8 years ago, actually.
oh,
It
eight
feels
years
like two
ago.
years ago,
Okay,
but it's 8 years ago.
wow. And when I shared information about this chat, a lot of people remembered the series and were like, "Oh, Tunde from Twitter." So that really made you popular. And also another series, Yobachi. That one was based on Buchi Emecheta, right?
Correct. Correct.
Okay, and then the last one was Ahosi, based on Dahomey Ahosi as well. So Tunde is a
Hmm.
publisher. Do you publish all your books?
Yes, I did.
Wow. Okay. So Tunde is a
Hmm.
publisher at TLS Place Media, a stage play producer, and a filmmaker. And then you've spoken at several festivals. I've heard you at Arcade festivals before. You've spoken at Labaf. Labaf is Lagos Book and Arts Festival. Tunde is also a partner and director at Africa Focus research firm called SBM Intelligence, and you're a co-founder of a fintech firm called Credequity. I hope I did that. I hope I did a good
Hmm.
job with that.
He
Okay.
tried.
And
He
also, you're
tried.
on the board of an automobile maker, Nord Automobiles. Tunde
Hmm.
lives and writes in Nigeria. So, welcome, Tunde. Thank you for joining us today. So, Tunde, we're
Thanks
going to
for
be talking
having me.
about your book. Okay, you're welcome. We're going to be talking about your book, Aganju. So, you can just tell us a bit about it, and then we'll go to the book reading.
Okay. Thanks for having me. Farida. Thanks, Bookworm Cafe. I really appreciate being here. And I'm glad that many people remember some of the work from 8 years ago, from 10 years ago, and the recent ones as well. So thanks for being with me on all that journey. This Agonju is sort of me returning to the first thing I wrote. So my first work was a children's book. The children's book you spoke about, the rat race. And then I've done a lot of other things in the period. I've written rom-com, I've written comedy, I've done film, I've done stage, I've done historical, which was the one most recent one, Afonja the Rise. I've done fantasy. But children's books are always a love for me. So my daughter is one of the reasons I wrote this book. She's a book lover. She probably loves books more than me, and she makes sure I read to her every night. So I began to say, okay, let me do something for her now. And as part of the research process for Afonja, and it happens to a lot of writers, you research far and wide when you're trying to write a book. And because you research far and wide when you're trying to write a book, there are many pieces of your research that don't go into your book. And for a lot of writers,
Yeah.
you say, what can I do? What can I do with this bits of research? Should I just throw them away? So for me, Twitter was an outlet for a lot of those research. So I do a lot of this historical stuff on Twitter just
Yes, I
to
follow
be
you.
able to to be able to outlet some of the plenty research and say, this thing can always like. But I also have a conversation around, when we think about our myths and legends, there are a lot of young people that have no clue about our myths and legends, the same way they have no
Yes.
clue about our history. So for I'm Afonja, a lot of the people that have read the book, that has been their first encounter with that aspect of history. In the same way, if
Yeah.
you ask a young person today who, say, issue is, most of those young people would say Satan, because that's how it was translated when Crowder translated the Bible to Yoruba. But if you ask the older Yoruba people, they will tell you that it's a slightly different character that was just approximated. It's closer to a Loki in Norse mythology or a Hermes in Greek mythology. Um, and you find that a lot of the young people know the nuances of this, thanks to, of course, Hollywood and comics and books and stories. They know all of the Norse mythology and the Greek mythology and the Roman mythology. And even today, because of things like Naruto, um, anime, manga, and all of that, people are beginning to know Asian mythology very well, but they don't know ours. So this
Yeah.
book is essentially a story about a young boy that finds himself to be a mythical being. And of course, you know how this kind of things goes. It goes on a couple of adventures to discover himself. So this is the first of his adventures that introduces him into that world that shows, you're more than just this boy in secondary school on your bunk. So that's what Aganju is.
Okay.
It's centered around the Oyo Empire. So you find it interesting in that regard, but encompasses a couple of other mythological points. But
Okay.
written for children. So it's not all this fancy English I've spoken.
Okay. That's awesome. So and Afonja was centered around the Oyo Empire. So I guess this was just the watered down
This,
version for children. Okay.
this was the use of some of the research for children, yeah.
Okay. So I want you to share just a bit from the book with us. I don't know what portion of the book you would like to read with
Okay.
us. You can pick
I'll do
anyone.
that. Yeah,
Okay.
I picked one because I like that a couple of the characters show up in this scene. So it's a good place to talk about some of the characters that show up and the mythology of those
Okay.
characters. So as a background, they've gone through one adventure and they have been chased by fantastical creatures and they're in a safe place. And then all of a sudden, they heard a loud rustle behind them and Ishu turned, raising his guard. A large snake emerged from behind the trees and approached them. It was as long as a four-story building and as wide as a small car. Bako stood petrified. It moved faster than its size should have permitted. As the snake got close, he saw it had a man's face. Unlike Ishu's handsome face, it was a fierce one, with half of the head shaven and a full beard. He was still trying to understand how he had just spat fire like a dragon. And now this. The night just got stranger and stranger. Ojolai Beru, welcome. Did you secure the Arogidiba? Ishu asked. Yes, my lord. I had to swallow her in order to transport her, and that slowed me down. Some of my pursuers caught up before I reached Aganju. I fought as best as I could, but conserve your strength, Ojola. I understand. He, pointing to Bako, came as a yam, Ishu said. Now, the girl, he commanded. Ojola said in a loud voice, no one swallows an Adiye Irano forever. With that, it fell to the ground and the snake's body began to contract. The jaw of the human head opened like a snake's unhinged jaw, and it vomited a girl about Bako's age. She lay still, covered in Ojola's stomach juices, as if dead. Ishu darted forward as soon as she emerged, and he poured the Oshun water over her. Ojola's slime washed away, and she coughed up water before jumping as if startled. Ojola tried to raise itself off the ground, but the giant snake fell back into a heap. It was then that the wounds on its body became visible. It had been viciously attacked. Ishu moved to attempt to heal it, but it shook its head. I have played my part, my lord. She is here now, and I am exhausted. Let me depart. But before I do, allow me see him. Ojola said. Ishu nodded in understanding and stepped back so Ojola could see Bako. With supreme effort, it raised itself and bowed. With a painful smile, it breathed, Your Highness, before collapsing. Ojola's body disintegrated into nothing. Ishu stood, lost in thought, as he looked at the final fragment of his lieutenant. Thank you.
Wow. That sounds very action-packed. Okay, so I follow your work on Twitter and you share a lot about history, which is very fascinating. In fact, I got really interested in a lot about Nigerian history from following your tweets. So I just want to ask you a few questions because I have questions as well. And then I've seen some questions from some of the guests that we have here. How do you go about fact finding when you are writing these stories? Because you share some really deep facts when you're, especially on Twitter. How do you find these
Okay.
facts?
Okay, so I think it's a lot of research. That's the first part of it. So a lot of books, a lot of very obscure books, a lot of very old books. Some of these things are theories where I fill in the gaps. Some of them are things where I've read something maybe 3 years ago, and I read something else now that looks unrelated. But because I have read that thing 3 years ago, I can find the relationships. Some of them are traveling to certain places. Some of them are talking to certain people that have done previous work. So the works of the likes of Professor Toyin Falola, or Samuel Johnson, of a couple of white men. The most recent one I was reading was about a reverend called Reverend Stone that lived in Ijaye during the Ijaye War. So he gave an eyewitness account of the Ijaye War that essentially corroborated like 4 or 5 other things that I had read before. Typically, I try to make sure that find I triangulate whatever can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Okay.
Um so typically I try to triangulate the things I present as
Okay.
fact. Multiple sources, um, different kind of sources. So there's written sources, there's oral sources, there's sources in the visual arts of the people. I'll give you an example. When I was researching Afonja and I wanted to look at how an Are Kakanfo would look like, I read some descriptions in certain books. I listened to oral history to dress and be attired and do his hair. And then I also found a sculpture that was a representation of an actual Are Kakanfo that matched what all of those descriptions have said it should look like. And that was what then those three taken together was what confirmed that for me. So that's sort of how my process is like. I like to find multiple sources, and if I can, I find different types of sources to corroborate different things.
I listened to, I was at Ake Festival, and when I heard you say in the panel, the historical fiction panel, where you said you actually
Mm.
traveled while you
Yes,
were gathering data for, and I was like, so you went to pick up this data yourself?
yes. So a good number of the data is not, and that's one of the things that we're hoping to be able to solve. There's a gentleman called Eddie Kiazo that is doing a lot of good work in digitizing, but more focused around colonial history. So from the 1850s down. Um, Hopefully, other people will pick up the talent to digitize previous history. But what we have today is that a lot of the history is dispersed and scattered in all sorts of places. Sometimes you find what you are looking for in a JSTOR paper, academic paper that maybe only 3 people have read, and that's where you find what you're actually looking for to corroborate something you heard as an oral source. And there are many historical things around us that, because we don't know the history around them, we pass them. So you go to
Yeah.
Ibadan, for example, and you pass a statue. That person's statue, Oluyole's statue in Ibadan, who was Oluyole? Many people just pass that statue every day, but they don't know. But if I'm going to look at that statue with some background, then I'm able to confirm some of or debunk some of the things I've seen by studying that statue. So those are the kind of things that require travel. To talk to some people, for example, there's a tomb keeper in Igboho that has a lot of the history and a lot of the oral history that that person gave was corroborated in some of the books that I found. So that's really, yeah, I did travel. I traveled a bit, just a
Okay.
bit, not as much as I would like to.
Okay. Then someone said she noticed that Zizi said she noticed that there was a bit of Yoruba in the part where you read. Are there translations? Do you translate any part that is not that's for the book now? Do you translate any words
Okay.
that are not in English? So for
Um,
non-Yoruba speaking people.
for non-Yoruba speaking people, I did not, and it was deliberate. It was deliberate not to do that. So I read other books where there are inserts of a different language, but that are, for example, you read a book where there are inserts of French, but they are anglicized, and so essentially translated to English. You don't find um, definitions of those French words because they are French words that have been transported into English. What you find is a couple of things. You find context that defines what that word means, and it also piques interest in finding out. Because one of the things I want to be able to do is get people interested enough to then find out about the things I'm talking about.
Okay.
That's one of the things I want to do. So I didn't translate. Um, for example, there's a myth in Yoruba land about a snake called Ojola. Ojola is a snake, big snake that also has a big head, a human head. So body of a snake, human head. It's a popular myth. Many people don't know about it, but if you Google it, you'll find it. It was used in this Ogojo Odanimi Rumole. That's Dio Fagwa's book that was translated by Shoyinka into Forest of a Thousand Demons. Ojola is a character in that. Fagoa based it on that myth. So I've also used a similar character in this book as well. I want people to go out to look for
Yeah.
those tidbits. Yeah.
Okay, then someone else, Sherry Yesufu said, are there plans to turn this book into our own Nigerian mythology series, maybe an animated one for kids?
So yeah, I mean, to be candid, yes. One of the things I do, if you I'm on the full spectrum of storytelling. I'm a
Yeah.
publisher. I write prose, I do stage, and I've done film. I'm beginning to do more film. So finding hobby, for example, we're adapting into film. In fact, we're
Mm,
starting shoot. If it wasn't for Corona, I would have finished shooting Finding Hobby and we'll just be waiting
yeah.
to release it. So I'm going through that process because I'm essentially going to make sure that all the stories that we tell are going to be translated into all these forms. You find it on stage, you find it in books, you find it in chants, you will find it in film as well. So yeah, like I said at the beginning, this story is a story of a young man called Bako, who finds out that he's more than just a boy. And this adventure is his first adventure. In fact, the last line of the book, let me read what the last line of the book says. Um, just give me a second.
Okay.
Uh, the sorry, the last chapter of the book, what the last chapter of the book is called is the adventure, the true adventure begins. So it means that this book, yes, is an adventure, but it's just the door into the true adventure. So
True
there's the
adventure.
exactly there's the I mean there's going to be a series of Bako's adventures with his friends and all of that, almost like a series of Percy Jackson books. If you think about that
Okay.
series, a couple of Percy Jackson books, yeah. So they are demigods like Percy Jackson.
Okay. Okay. So, how would you say your experience has impacted and influenced your writing? How did you start this journey of consuming historical fiction, historical facts from everywhere?
Okay. So I've always, almost all of my writing, minus the first children's book, has always been based on some type of, has always had some historical.
Yeah.
So my first novel was called Golden Sands, and it was basically alternate history from the Abacha years. My second book was called Guardians of the Seals, and it was alternate history in using Christian mythology, but reimagining Christian mythology to include magic. So rather than the angels were now magical beings, not just divine beings, and many things like that, guardians of the seals. So I've always been
Mm,
very interested in history. But as time went on, I began to see that, yeah, all those other types of history I was writing, there was significant amount of material in terms of stories around them, you know. But if you think about a lot of the history of this area called Nigeria is told as if it started when the white man came.
Yeah.
So it's told as if we didn't have any significant history before white men came. It's always told in relation to the white man. And even in my research, most of the written sources are usually white men. So I spoke about Reverend Stone, who was in Ijaye. It was a white man that documented it.
Yeah.
But there were non-white guys around that time as well. And for the non-white, from one of the reasons I like Reverend Stone's account is that unlike most other white guys that center themselves, he told the story to show that look, these Yoruba guys, they had their own politics, their own motivations, the things that were causing them to fight. White men were just one of them, not access to the. They have their own internal stuff. So I realized that most of what introduced me to maybe Greek mythology or Norse mythology was stories. I spoke about Asian mythology just now. A lot of us now know things like Orochimaru, um, what was that, Amaterasu, which are Japanese myths. I don't, I first got introduced to them watching Naruto and all those
Yeah.
manga and anime and all of that. That's how I got introduced to them before I now started reading other stuff about them. I found out that there was not a lot of that for our people. There was not a lot of that. And so one of the things I want to keep doing is to tell stories about our history and our myths that are not centered around the presence of white people. It can have white people there. It can be around the time they were, but tell it from the perspective of the black people that were the main protagonists in that history. If you remember Hosi, it was told from the eyes of one of the Dahomey Amazons.
Yeah.
Not There was a white man there that was sitting beside her king, and I could have written it from the perspective of that white man, which is typical. But I wrote it from the perspective of that Dahomey Amazon. What was she feeling? What was she seeing? What were her motivations as she went to fight a war in Abeokuta in the early 1800s?
Okay. So how do you vet your sources? I mean, how do you because that's something I also worry about when I find information,
Sure.
say, on the internet. How do I know this is correct?
hmm Okay. So for historical sources, like I said, I usually triangulate. So I wouldn't take something from a single source, except of course some sources are pretty credible. So Professor Tony Falola, for example, is a pretty credible source. But I
Yeah.
also always try to study the biases of people. So I'll give you an example. Samuel Johnson, because he was an Oyo man, he was a Yoruba man, but he was an Oyo man. He was an Oyo prince, in fact, a descendant of Alaafin Abiodun. So a lot of his writing had an Oyo-centric bias.
Aha.
So as I read a Samuel Johnson, um, I recognize that there will be Oyo-centric bias, and then I try to find other accounts of the same event by
Yeah.
a non-Oyo person or by a white man or something that will then show perspective. I give an example again. Today I was on Twitter, and there's a handle I like, Yoruba History, that talked
Yeah.
about Kurumi of Ijaye and how Ijaye was destroyed, and it posted Samuel Johnson's account. And in Samuel Johnson's account, Samuel talked about Kurumi had some disagreements with their laughing, and that was the source of his. Now, if somebody read it from that angle, you would think it was a small disagreement, and that it was Kurumi that was even being belligerent. That's the way Samuel Johnson's framing made it look
Yeah.
like. So was there a disagreement? Absolutely, but that framing was not the complete framing. So I found a couple of other sources that then showed the detail of that disagreement. Kurumi was invited to Oyo. He went because he was a titled man from the king, even though at that time he didn't have to go, he was stronger than Oyo. But he went there, and there was a conspiracy to kill him. And he felt and it looked very credibly that the laughing was behind the conspiracy to kill him, which he had to essentially fight his way out of Oyo and escape. and he never went back to Oyo since then. So it became like the Alaafin's mortal enemy because he believed, credibly so, that the Alaafin made an attempt on his life. That kind of balance sort of paints a different picture from what
Yeah.
Johnson put together. So that's sort of my process. I look at other sources that some people tend not to. Good thing I'm Yoruba, so I can understand Yoruba sources. Um, I'll give you another example. There's a very popular Yoruba saying where they say a lawyer only bodiakomo, which alluded to when people were besieging the town of Akomo, and after the king had sacrificed, the Bale of Akomo had sacrificed himself. That was the source of that proverb. But because I'm Yoruba and I have a background of that proverb, when I'm reading a source that talks about the event, I can triangulate and say, oh yeah, this works. I talk about sculpture, art as well. You look at the art, and um, one instance, if you look at the Oba of Lagos, it's the traditional dress of the Oba of Lagos, and you compare
Yeah.
it to the traditional dress of the Benin chiefs, you will see the resemblance almost immediately. So when there are claims that the Obaship of Lagos had its roots in the Benin Kingdom, it's credible, it's believable because there are other social artifacts that corroborate that. So I think it's that kind of thing where you look at multiple sources to triangulate the fact that you're trying to confirm, essentially.
Okay, so there's a question here that says, I'm curious, what's the reception of your book? What has the reception of your book been like? How inclined are parents and schools to recommend these kinds of books? And um, when there's mythology, when there's all of this, sometimes parents will
People
are
start,
reluctant to accept or embrace books like this. What's been the reception of
when,
stories like
when,
this?
so good thing is the book is not out yet. It's going to be out in um, November-ish, and that's primarily because of COVID. This is the first book I'm
Yeah,
printing outside the country. So I made the decision to print outside the country this time, and COVID started, which means my books are stuck in India at the moment.
yeah,
But it should be in October, November, and so we'll know at that time. I expect
okay,
there to be some kickback. So parents say, issue. The children, I expect that to be the case. But these parents take their children to go and watch Loki and to go and watch
exactly,
Thor and to go
yeah.
and watch all of those guys. So my counter argument will be if you can do that, then absolutely you should listen to this and give it an opportunity. Because you ask yourself, what's the material difference between Shongo and Thor? What's the material difference between Shango and Thor? There's not a lot. Is the god of thunder. They both have battle axes. They both spit fire. So they're like similitudes of the same person. If you can allow your children watch Thor, then maybe you should also be able to allow your children watch Shango as well. So let's see is my answer. Let's see. Let's see what parents will say. It will be an interesting ride. I expect to get some pushback, but let's see. You might be surprised. I didn't expect the reception for Afonso to be as great as it was. I didn't think people would be as interested in history, but it's been my most well received book so far. So,
Okay. Someone asked, when is the sequel to Afonja coming out? Your readers are hungry for more.
so there are a couple of things in the pipeline before the Afonso sequel. First is this book. If you observe my writing process, I write a big book. Then in between the big book, I write a small novella or
Mm-hmm.
this kind of small book, and then I write a big book again. So this is the small book in between the two Afonjas. So the next Afonja should be in about 18 months time.
I'm in a meeting. I'm in a meeting.
The next Afonja should
Okay.
be in
In
about
about 18
18 months
months.
time. Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
And hopefully we'll get a
What's the
Netflix film before that time.
sorry, I didn't get that.
I said, and hopefully we'll get a Netflix film of Afonja before that time. Just putting it out
Okay.
there. Yeah.
What would you say is the age range for Agonju?
It will be between 8 and about 12.
Eight
So
to
between
12.
8 and
Okay.
12. Yes, yes.
Okay. Are we going to expect other books after Agonju? I'm sure you still have data that you've not used. That
Definitely. So, like I've reiterated, we're going to get other books in this series. Bako and his friends will go on many, many, many other adventures. We're going to get quite a few of them. And if we find the funding, we'll do maybe some animation as well.
okay. Are there any books that have inspired your writing? Books now.
Ab- Absolutely. I've mentioned a couple of them today.
Yeah, you
So
mentioned
one
some.
of the
Yes.
reasons I like fantasy, excuse me, I like fantasy a lot. Fantasy stories, stories that have fantastical creatures and all of that. So on this side, you think about Ogboju Odeninu Igboerumola, Dio Fagbawa's book. I love the book a lot. I read Lord of the Rings almost once every year. It's like one of my favorite books ever. Um, in more recent times, I liked what's her name? I liked Chimamanda's the Civil War book. What's the name of that book now?
Which one?
Half of a Yellow Sun. I liked it.
Okay.
I like the style of that. Of course, so typically people ask me, are you an Achebe person or a Wole Soyinka person? I'm more of an Achebe person. I like the more simple style of storytelling on Achebe. So if you think about writers along those lines, Passport of Malam Ila, Elechi Amadi's books, Concubine, and the like,
Concubine.
those are the kind of books that those are the kind of books I like a lot. Yeah.
Okay. Then, so one thing I like to leave parents with is because you have to be a reader for you to have this this volume of information. Any reading tips? You also have children. What is it that you do to encourage children to read? And then if there are even children who are interested in history, who are interested in mythology, how can parents
Mm.
encourage them?
Okay. So I'll use an ongoing experiment that I'm doing with my daughter to answer that
Okay.
because it's also ongoing for me. Um, First thing is that there are books all over my house. So um, decent library, the books lie around. My children always see me reading something. I'm always reading something either on the phone or as a book itself or on my laptop. So that's sort of the first um, foundation. Children emulate what they see. So if they're seeing you reading a lot, it gets them interested in what is this person doing, what that person doing, and all of that. Now after that, you then make the resources available to them. So I buy books every 2 weeks, a new book every 2 weeks for my daughter, and we read together at night. So I read to her at night, and then she also reads on her own during the day, and then she tells me about it. I encourage her to make up stories. I encourage her to make up stories. I encourage her to tell me the stories that she has made up. And that gets her just more interested in not just books, but general storytelling. Because I usually tell people that what you want to get your children interested in is not books per se. A book is really a medium of storytelling. So get your
Yeah.
children interested in storytelling. Tell them stories verbally, show them stories in writing, let them watch stories as well, discuss the stories with them. They will pick up books that will tell them these stories as they go on. So that for me, that's the reading. That's the first thing. Children need to see you reading. Children need to be encouraged about storytelling, and then you set out time to read with them, so that you cultivate the habit of reading in them. And it costs some money to invest in. You need to buy books. It's as if people know that investing in children should be expensive. So children's books are typically significantly more expensive
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
regular books. Probably, of course, because the cost of producing them is usually more. You need more durable materials. They're usually in
Yeah.
color. Color printing is more
Follow.
expensive, and they're usually hardcover. All of that contributes to the cost. So for me, those are the two things. And what I did when I was growing up as a child was that I invested in books myself. I would save up money to buy books and spend time to read them. So books like Kokubaboni, like Adia Naughty Little Brother, all of the Pace Setters, Orechokwe. What's that Orechokwe book now? Without a Silver Spoon. Just
Yeah.
took my own time to read them as well. And the house was conducive to let me read. I would read everywhere. When I'm eating, I'm reading. When I'm washing, I'm reading, and everything and all of that. I think it's all of that as accumulation that gets your children into reading. What they see you do, what you make available to them, the kind of discussions and the things that you create for them. Specifically around history, you need to make it interesting for them. That's the only way. My kids are, I mean, the oldest of my children is going to be 5 shortly. So I'm just getting them into it. She's not yet that at that stage where I'll get her significantly interested. So I'm focusing more on language now, and then as we go on, she'll begin to get into history. Language is a window into history, if you think about it. So if you get them into language, they begin to get into history at some point as well.
I imagine that you tell your children a lot of these stories.
Yes, I do. So we have a tell me a story and I'll tell you a story times. So my daughter likes to make up stories, and if you check her mom's video, Instagram stories, you see where she was telling a story she
Yeah.
made up, and it just dragged, it just dragged on and on and on. But we let her tell those stories, and then I tell her stories as well to teach her, to encourage her to continue to tell her stories. And all of, sometimes I run away because the stories just get too long, but we do that. We do that. Absolutely.
Okay, there's a question here. How can we publicize our culture and African history above the culture of the white man?
Mm.
Okay, great. I don't know if it's an above.
Above the culture, how can we publicize it?
What did you say?
Above the culture, how can we publicize our culture? How can we make it more important than the culture of the white man? She,
Can you hear me?
yes, I can. Okay, let me go over the question again. Can you hear me?
I can. I think my headphone has quenched.
Okay, how can we publicize our culture and African culture above the culture of the white man?
Okay, so what I was saying in response to that is, look, put them side by side and make them as interesting. I keep asking people, what do you remember the most? Is it a history lesson or a story? If I told you in 1850 there was a war in Nigeria and there was a man called Kurumi that fought a war, there were 20,000 casualties, you would probably gloss over it. But if you think about it, if I tell you along the lines of how there was a woman in Akumu that they began to quarrel over, and this one said, I'll slap you, and I tell you a story, and I build a story around that person, you probably find that more interesting and, crucially, more memorable. We are built to recall stories better than lessons. So we need to tell our people more stories in all sorts of media, books, film, cartoons, you name it, and put our history in those media. That's number one. Number two, we don't need to be so rigid about how we tell our story. The Thor in the Marvel movies is not the same Thor as the historical Thor. They've taken some artistic liberty. And you don't hear people from the places where they used to worship Thor saying, hey, you are disrespecting our Thor. You are not representing our Thor properly. So we need to also get to that place where we don't see artistic liberty as a disrespect of our culture. We need to get to that place where we just realize that these people are interesting people and telling a story. Using our culture as part of the tools of telling that story. It's not a disrespect of the culture. It is what it is.
Okay, nice. Someone says, have you considered theater for children?
Not yet. Not yet. I haven't done that yet. I haven't thought about that yet.
Okay. Stage plays of your book as another medium of storytelling.
we did an Afoja stage play when Afoja came out at Muson Center, and it was really beautiful. So we've done that, and we plan to do more of that. I'm a finance person as well, as my profile says. So I also always think about how to make sure that it's economically viable to do these things. But yes, stage is one of the things we definitely want to do and keep on doing. We've done one, we keep on doing as well. But what's next in the pipeline is film, the Finding Hobby film, and then a couple of other films, and then we'll go back to stage and book.
Because even for Aganju and stories like this, stage play will make them more widely acceptable amongst children, even children who are not naturally interested in history and folk tales and all of that. Stage play will make it more acceptable to them. Okay.
You're very correct. That's
There's
correct.
another question. Yes. Okay, there's another question. I really like the point about artistic, I can't read this, I don't know, artistic license. Yes, do lots of research, but it shouldn't stifle our artistic liberties.
That's very correct. That's very correct.
Okay, then there was a question from the beginning that I missed when someone asked, when did you start writing? I'm not done.
This is 2020, so I started writing 2006.
2006. Okay.
I started writing. I've been writing stuff before that, but I started paying proper attention to it in 2006. My first book came out in 2010. And then I started blogging 2011.
Okay. So Tunde, I want to ask the guests, okay, there's another question. Okay, a comment, please do the play for Afonja. Hopefully everything will be back up and running by December. we have some tribe members for Afonja here.
Hopefully. But like I said, what is in play for December is the Finding Hobby.
Yeah.
That's what's in play. Yes, so please come out and watch it. Hopefully things are back to normal at that time.
Okay, then Tunde, do you have any questions? I don't know if everyone here right now heard the book reading. Are there any parts you liked about the reading? Or what Tunde has shared about the story? Tunde, do you have any questions for your guests? Are there any questions you wish that we had asked you here today?
I can't think of any. I'm curious as to what they think about the story. I'm not curious in that regard.
Okay, because I was just wondering if there are any questions you're anticipating from your readers that we haven't asked or here.
Not really. Not
Okay.
really.
Okay, so I guess in the watching, do we have any questions? Because we're rounding off. Do you have any questions for Tunde? So Tunde, when the book is out, how will we know about, how will we hear about it?
Well, we're going to announce it properly. We're going to make sure everybody knows about it. We'll come back to you, let you know the book is out. That we're going to do a couple of reading events all around. So we'll make it very public that the book is available when it's ready.
Okay.
And that should be around. It takes 3 months to get here. So we're in August, September, October. So November-ish is when the book will get back.
Okay, so we should be looking at November then.
Around November, yes.
Okay, then someone asked, is there any advice for potential writers as per publishing in Nigeria?
That one is a full
a full discourse.
It's a full session, full discussion. Publishing in Nigeria. Let's just say that it's a lot better now than it used to be. It's a lot better now than it used to be. Also, I think the internet and a couple of businesses have democratized things such that you can control your marketing, you can control your distribution. I'll give an example. When I published my first book, I had to distribute through my friends that live in other cities. So people would tell me they wanted to buy, and then my friends that live in those cities will deliver to them. So I had to use family and friends all over, and then a few bookshops. Today, for Afonja the Rise, I just outsourced distribution to Macedonia. For
Okay.
Guardians of the Seals, I outsource distribution to Rosen Heights. So there are people that have solved those kind of problems, distribution problems, marketing, of course, these kind of things that we're doing now, all these kinds of tools, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all these things have also democratized building your own base. And even if you don't want to print, you just want to do ebooks, there are many tools to do that domestically, or Okada books, BAM books, all sorts of different platforms, internationally, Amazon, and the like. So you have more options now, is what I'm saying. Hello.
Hi, say hi.
Hi.
You have more options today than maybe 10 years ago when my own first book came out. You have more options. Somebody said outsource to who?
Outsource to who? I'm not going to give you.
So I outsourced distribution to 2 different companies for 2 different books. I outsourced distribution to Masube for Afonja. I outsourced distribution to Roving Heights for Guardians of the Seals. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so Temi, that answered your question. Ridlan was also asking and saying that you should read the book, but I think you joined late. He had already read a bit from the book. That has already happened. Then DIY Mom, I hope that answers your question as regards, well, not really, but publishing in Nigeria. It's long. It's a full day's course, like he has said. Do we have any other questions? Because time is almost up. Okay, so Tunde, we are looking forward to the announcement. I follow you on Twitter, so I'm just waiting to hear books are ready to order. And then we'll be ready to read.
I shall be glad as you find. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. This was fun. Thank you so much.
Right. Bye.
All right. Bye.